Hi everyone, I'm Kieran Taylor,
I'm Martin Welsh.
and welcome to another episode of Those Pension Guys. So we're focusing on quite a big topic today, aren't we, Martin?
We are a
And
very exciting one.
One we hear quite a lot. How do I build £1,000,000 pension fund? So why do we hear that a lot, do you think? Because it is something, when you ask clients what their goals are, often it's £1,000,000 in a pension that's floated about. Why do you think that is?
It is. It's such a big, easy number. But I say easy. It's a big aspirational number. But equally, it's got a heap of zeros, big one at the front of it.
Yeah.
And I think that's just a massive goal that a lot of people, aspire to get to.
I think so. I think it's a psychological thing. I think for some reason I don't know whether it was studies that were done in the past or something someone was told, but they just have that feel of, if I've got £1,000,000 in my pension, I feel like I've made it. I feel like I can afford to retire. I think the reality of it is, though, that for some people, that's way too much. They wouldn't need a pension that size to retire. Equally, and on the other side of the coin, there's people that actually that wouldn't be enough. So I suppose it's important for people to take a more thematic approach to think, well, actually, what is going to work for me? But today, let's focus on how do you get there? How do you get to £1,000,000?
Yeah.
So put it on you then. Where do you start? How do you start in this journey towards getting that £1,000,000 pension?
That's it. It's great to have goals, and for some that's pretty aspirational. It's good to shoot for the stars. Because if you miss, you'll still get quite.
You
far
still get
there.
to the moon. That's the old phrase, isn't it?
Yeah, totally. So the best starting point though is you need to know where you are right now. There's no point in aiming for something and not even know what you've got already.
Yeah.
So the simple, really simple steps to start with are what have I got today? So have you got some old pensions? Have you got, were you in the military, you've got that pension, or the NHS, you've got one pension, or a school teacher, or is it you've jumped around a few different jobs, you've built up a few policies? Something we come across quite often is, if you get married and your name changes, or you move house, away from your original home with your parents, maybe at your first job, just where are you right now? Gather up all the pensions, get your house in order, know where you're starting from, know your baseline.
And it is as simple as knowing you're literally going, so if I've got 5 pensions, let me just calculate them and see, right, starting today, I've got X.
Yeah, so, hopefully some of the hard work's been done and you're actually starting from something that isn't zero. Then it'll be even easier to get to the £1,000,000. You then need to be realistic and look at your earning capacity.
Yeah.
So what are you earning now and what could your future look like? If you're in a highly qualified role, that's going to have serious increases in salary, then you can try and fit that into the plan of, well, if I know my salary is going to double when I get to this level in 3 years' time, then actually I'm going to put twice as much into my pension, I'd imagine. So know your capacity, the earning capacity within that, but equally, what do you spend and how much can you allocate to pensions? Because it's all very well, I see it with clients all the time that they're paying in 20, 25, 30% into their pension. That's amazing. But for some, that might impact their standard of living today.
Yeah.
So look at the capacity you've got and decide how much you can allocate to that pension.
Because I suppose that's a fair point, isn't it? You kind of need to establish whatever your goal is, whether it's £1,000,000 or not, is that actually going to be attainable? Because there's no point in having this number in your head that when you do the maths, actually, that doesn't really make sense.
Totally. And then the last part of the equation is, how long have you got?
Yeah.
So it's all very well, you know what you've got, you know what you can put away, but how long can you do that for? So if you're 4 years away from retirement and you've got £200,000 in a pension, I'd imagine that's quite a big dream to get to the £1,000,000 pension. Potentially still possible, but very hard. Whereas if you're in your 30s, you've got £50,000 in a pension, but you've got 30 years to be allocating into a pension. It's much easier to do that in bite-sized chunks out those 30 years and potentially really achieve your goals then.
Time's your friend really with this, isn't it?
It is.
The more time you've got, the easier it is.
It is. It's something that we speak about all the time. I'm yet to have a client walk through the door and say, darn, I wish I didn't do this yet.
Yeah.
Usually, I wish I'd done this sooner. I wish I thought about this sooner. So it is. It's all about what have you got today, how much can you put into it, and how long have you got?
So let's try and put some numbers on this then. It's maybe worth us giving a real life example, real life study of, give an example. How does someone start to look at this once they've got their numbers together? What could it potentially look like for them?
Yes, and you know me, I love numbers. I love statistics, working things out, building that sort of cash flow model, if you like. Keeping things really simple. Let's just say you were 40 years old and you had built up £210,000 in a pension.
Right.
You worked at a few companies, contributed in, just sitting 210,000, 40 years old. Let's just pick a number. Obviously nothing's guaranteed in our game. You can't guarantee growth. You can't guarantee anything. But let's just assume it grew 8% a year, purely for the purpose of this calculation. So in 20 years' time, that would grow to £1 million.
Without putting any money
So
in.
yeah, so you're 40 years old, you've got 210,000 already, grows at 8%, you leave it to do its thing for 20 years,
Right.
£1 million pension. Bang, you've achieved your goal.
Wow.
You've not done anything but leave the market to do it for you.
Mm.
That sounds really good, but the cost of inflation.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously inflation changes every year, but if you go with the statistical average over the last 30 years and put that into the calculation, technically it's halved. So that £1 million still says 100, all the numbers are there, but the spending power, what you can buy with that money, has halved in value.
Yeah.
So technically you only really have £500,000 in today's money,
Mm-hmm.
even though it says £1 million in 20 years' time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the real, the erosion, the cost of living, the erosion that's had on that capital value. So that's a really important one in our game. It's really easy to project forward and think, I'm going to get there. But think of the last 5 years, how much milk, bread,
Yeah.
Freddo bars are always the really exciting,
Yeah,
the really popular one. Think how much things go up. So that's something that you really need to be conscious of and build into the plan.
It's funny, I sound like an old man. I was out with my pals. You were there as well on the Friday, weren't you? We talked about when we first went drinking. Remember a pint of 10? It was like £2.80, and it was like glory days. But yeah, we are where we are now. But it's important. You're right, in the long term plan. That I think it's important for people to know today that they've got a long term to retire. That £1 million sounds like a lot today, but you're right. In 20 years' time,
that's a £20-30 pint by then, I imagine. That's a
Exactly, yeah.
scary thought.
yeah. Okay, no, so that's good. That's good to put that in a bit of perspective.
It
on
is.
that.
And so the next way to combat that is to say, well, okay, that person in their 40s, actually, they start putting £1,000 away every month. So £1,000 every single month is going into that plan, as well as it growing at 8% with £210,000 to start. That means in 20 years' time, you've got £1.6 million in a pension.
Oh, okay.
But that's your £1 million magic number after you adjust it for inflation.
Yeah.
So it shows you the power. That's a lot of money that needs to be put away over the next 20 years just to keep pace with inflation. So it's all very well, I want to have £1 million pension, but if you're too far away, it's easy to do, but you probably need even more because of inflation.
So kind of what I'm hearing with this is that actually time is your friend, but also I guess if you can top up the investments somewhere along the line as well, that's going to make a big difference.
Totally.
Okay, interesting. So one of the things I wanted to talk about was actually the investment strategy of your pension, because I think truth being told, with most people that are, 20 years away from retirement, if you ask them, what is your pension invested in? I don't really know. I'm in what they call the default fund if you're in a workplace pension scheme, where if you are enrolled in that scheme, they will put you into the default. Now that could be right for you, it might not be right for you. That's kind of the game. But where I see a lot of people going wrong is they spend years, if not decades, in the wrong investment fund. And we want to try and put some numbers on this as well. So through our own research, what we managed to find was that the average return of a medium risk, what we call a 60-40 portfolio, 60% equities, 40% bonds and cash, of the workplace schemes that we've seen on average do about 5% a year net of charges. Over the same time period, the MSCI World Index, which is the index that tracks the performance of the developed global stock market, so Europe, the UK, America, etc., since 1975 has averaged 10% a year. Now you think about that. If you can deliver a better investment outcome for yourself year on year, decade after decade, that gets you there far closer. And how much are you leaving behind by being in the wrong fund for a long, long space of time? But we've talked a lot about average return per year. That's not real life.
No.
Now, you can calculate it and say since 1975, it has done this, and that's great. Markets don't move like that. Up, down, sideways, massive bull markets, massive bear markets. That's the name of the game. But if you can handle volatility, particularly years before retirement, you know that actually, if the stock market has a bad year today, it's not going to make a massive difference. I'm retiring in 19 years' time. Hold it out, stick it through. You tend to get the better investment outcomes.
You do that. That's incredible numbers, though. And absolutely, we're not here to say your balanced or off-the-shelf workplace portfolio is wrong.
Yeah.
But let's be honest, if you're 18 to 65, quite a lot of workplaces have you in the exact same one model portfolio.
Yeah.
There are schemes out there I've seen that are more age-adjusted, retirement targeted.
Yeah, they're trying to get better, aren't they?
So that is improving, but the vast majority of people that we see are in those balanced portfolios. And it's detrimental. The figures don't lie. What you just said there is that's double the returns. So if you've got the same amount of time, you're paying in the same amount of money,
Yeah.
you could have double the return or double the growth,
Yeah.
double the pension at the end of the day. Like that makes such a huge difference.
Because we see people get an even better outcome this way, don't they? That maybe, for example, they said, I want the £1 million by the time I'm 65. But because it managed to get this bit right over a number of years, they get there by 61, 62.
Yes.
And they realise, God, I can actually retire 3 years earlier. That's the difference. 3 extra years of your life, 3 extra years of retirement you can get by doing this. So it is so, so, so important. But again, I think this is where the advice market comes to the rescue, that you can sit down with someone independent to really understand, okay, what are you in today? Why? Does it make sense? And could you and should you be improving things going forward?
Yes, and it's interesting because actually I can think of a few clients that are closer to retirement. They weren't in a fund that does any lifestyle, as they call it, which is de-risking it, and they've actually ended up in what they believe is a portfolio that's taken too much risk for their comfort level at that age. So it is important, of course, we do want to build people's portfolios. We do want the best for them, but equally for some clients, that's the opposite of what they want. And we can adjust to that and obviously give them the right advice around the lower risk portfolios. But that's a real big key takeaway, that too often, like I've already said, we see clients and they say, oh, I wish I came earlier. I wish I came years ago. And I think there's a lot of people out there that maybe are quite guilty of being so absorbed in family, their career, and, oh, I'll retire in 10 years' time. Oh, well, in 8 years' time, I'll start really looking into it. I'll start thinking about it. Think of that difference in growth over that 8 years before retirement and what impact that would have on the pension fund.
Because how many times do we see it, and we hear even clients say when they come in eventually with the papers, and the pension paperwork's folded up in such a way that that's been living in a kitchen drawer for 10 years. And like this sounds odd to say. It's sometimes the paperwork even has a smell of the house still on it, like it's been stagnant in a drawer for so long.
Right.
But that's how people have looked at it. That it's just, this is just going to sit there. It'll be what it'll be until 5 years before I retire. But if you're willing to take an interest in this stuff now, genuinely can be absolutely life changing. So the investment strategy, a huge thing.
It is.
But what other top tips have you got, Martin? So how do I get to this £1 million pension pot?
Yeah, so it's actually one of your favourite ones, pound cost averaging.
Yeah.
Is the first top tip, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's it. Being able to buy in the market monthly. Because how many times do we hear from clients, when is the best time to go in? How can I buy the dip or time the market? The bad news is nobody knows. Nobody knows when it's the top. Nobody knows when it's the bottom. The best chance that you've got is to put money in monthly. Because even when the market goes through hard times and there's a bit of a dip, you're buying in at the low point. It's like going into Tesco and suddenly everything's 10% cheaper.
Yeah.
You were able to buy more fund, buy more shares at a lower cost at that time. And there's been loads of studies done from this that actually, statistically, you're more likely to win with an investment where you put something in monthly than rather than little clusters. Every now and then you just put a massive lump sum. Doing that annually, buying into the market, that gives you that best opportunity for growth. But
it does.
Your investments are like plants. They need fed. They need the opportunity. Money needs to go in to get it to work. So I think it's attainable for people too, isn't it? Because it doesn't hurt so much. If it's a small contribution, each month, you're bleeding that out rather than, God, I've got to part with 10, 15 grand in one go. I think it sort of makes that decision easier to swallow, doesn't it?
It does. And that is the other top tip here. If you're employed, hopefully you're enrolled into your scheme. It's UK law that you're enrolled, so unless you've chose to unenroll yourself, you'll be paying in. I think the UK it's 5%. Personal contribution is the minimum that has to be put in. So 4% is you, 1% is tax relief. That makes up 5%. Your employer has to put in the 3%. But what's really worth looking at, and especially with these bigger companies, we see it in Aberdeen a lot with oil and gas industry, of course, is a lot of employers are more generous and they pay more in. Some of them will pay more in and match you to pay more in.
Yeah.
So it's really worth looking at your employee handbook, speaking with HR, speaking with your company, because if they will match you to contribute any more, well, pay that little bit more in if you can afford to, and that will make a huge difference if you do that. Just that little bit extra, 1% increase, for example, over 20 years will make a big, big difference.
I guess it's worth touching this even with bonuses as well for the employed, isn't it? Because I think I mentioned this before, that sometimes if you feel you're getting a bonus towards the end of the tax year, there is that temptation of, I wouldn't mind getting the car an upgrade, or I wouldn't mind going on that holiday, flying business class. But then you look at it and think, well, hold on a minute. I'm going to lose nearly half of that in tax if you're in a higher rate tax position anyway. For some people, it does make sense. Do the delayed gratification thing. Pension it. In many cases, employers will say, do you want it paid to you, or you can
Yes.
pay it into the workplace scheme? That's fine. Not only do you get the income tax relief on it, but you maybe bought a few more years of retirement because you've managed to put that money in. But I think it's even the same for business owners as well, because you and I have done that.
Hmm.
When the business had a great year, and we can sit and look and think, okay, we could take out more of a dividend. We could also potentially pay more corporation tax. Or is this a time to say, actually, well, old Martin and old Kieran thank us by
Yeah.
saying, right, maybe let's put a lump sum into the pensions. It's maybe a
Hmm.
good time to do it. And it's delayed gratification, which can be a hard thing to do. I understand that. We do sometimes live in a fast paced world and I want this now and you only live
Yes.
once. And I do understand all those things. But I think if you're really serious about hitting a retirement goal like this, you kind of have to be willing to give up something now to get there, don't you?
You do. And I see it with some clients, if there's promotions, pay rises as well,
Yeah.
that there's some of those that will be quite strict and say, well, I'm living a good life. I'm living within my means right now. I've been given a 5% pay rise or something like that. Actually, I'm going to put all that into my pension. I don't
Yeah.
need it today, or I'll put most of it in. So there's a few people that have really tuned into this and said, right, I don't need my bonus. I don't need the pay rise when it comes along. I'm going to channel that straight into my pension.
Mhm.
And that delayed gratification could be you retire 7, 8 years earlier than you originally planned.
Yeah.
Imagine having 7, 8 years more in retirement at a younger age when you're more fit and able to do things.
Absolutely. It does make a difference, doesn't it?
And that's it.
And we touched on it before, but get serious about your pension investments. Really understand what you're invested in and why. What would be a good year for that kind of fund, that kind of performance? What would it get you roughly annually? Does that need to change? Is that going to get you to where you need to go? And for me, that's where the advice market steps in.
Hmm.
And often what we can do for clients, and you touched on it earlier, is run a cash flow, is run a projection and almost say, okay, well, if you keep doing what you're doing, what would that look like? Or actually, if you did make that change, if we did manage to change an investment proposition using this ETF or this passive fund, etc., if we could get you there quicker, would that interest you? Would you get you to where you want to be quicker?
Hmm.
But the underlying investments, get your money to work as hard for you as you do for it. Because
Yes.
there's so much that gets wasted. And I mean this, tens of thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands over someone's investment journey that can be lost by just not taking an interest in this stuff.
It's actually both sad and frightening
Yeah.
of if you haven't reviewed that and what you've missed out on. It's incredible the difference that could make. We always say that, get your money working for you.
Yeah.
You should have that working harder for you.
And something, talk to me a little bit about this, because we hear this sometimes from our business owner clients or even, friends, etc., that say, oh, well, that's not really relevant for me because my business is my pension.
Yes, and that's a worrying subject, I would say, or a worrying statement, because as much as I love the idea, we're business owners, we're
Yeah.
passionate, we love our business. So at one point there will be a sale. So most businesses will sell.
Mhm.
Let's be honest about that. So most people go into business, they build a great business with the idea of passing it on to sell it, whatever that might be. But it gets really worrying because actually, if you're thinking of a 20-year plan, for the
Mhm.
next 20 years, that business is responsible for paying your personal finances and
Mm.
helping you live your lifestyle, but also you're relying on it at the very end to give you the rest of
Yeah.
your years as a retirement fund. And that may very well work for a number of business owners. But if something happens along that way,
Mm.
that business no longer exists halfway through the 20 years, not only has it probably really made it difficult for you to live your normal life as a working person, you're then left with nothing for retirement. So
Yeah.
it really scares me. I get it. Business owners are ambitious. They believe in themselves. You need that. But it really scares me when a business owner says, "Ah, I'll be fine. I don't need a pension. My business is my pension."
Yeah.
Whereas actually, there's such a great opportunity. Diversify, fund fund some of your pension. I'm not saying you have to go mental and fill it right up and have the £1 million. If you've got a business, you might not need all that.
Mhm.
But putting money away, there's really good tax incentives to do that. It's good for the company. It's good for corporation tax. Also, it diversifies you. As a business owner, it allows you to be invested in a company in Asia, in America. You're diversified from maybe the Aberdeen market that your business is linked to, for
Yeah.
example.
Good, right? Good tips. Thank you for that, Martin. And thank you for listening. Hopefully, you found some good hints and tips there. If there's anything that you're unsure of, hey, get in touch with us directly. You can so via welshintothewealth.co.uk. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you again soon. Take care.